Hey, this is Joel Cameron. Thank you for checking out this video. I wanted to do a quick video to show you something that I did last week on a mix that I thought was really cool, and I thought it might be helpful to some people. Basically, that is faking an external kick drum mic with the internal mic. When I record drums, I always use two microphones on the bass drum. I use one on the inside and one on the outside. Typically, the drums are double headed, so there's a front head, and the outside really catches the resonance of that head. It's a very different character than the internal mic is capturing. And the two together allow a lot of tonal options when you're mixing to really make it fit everything else that's going on in the mix when you get ready to mix a track. And I got a track last week that I was mixing, and it had no external kick mic. And so I did what I'm getting ready to show you to fake an external kick mic. And I was really satisfied with the results. And so I thought it was worth showing. And this will be helpful to people, particularly who don't have enough microphones or enough inputs simultaneously to have the luxury really of dedicating a single mic just to the outside of the kick drum. And this keeps you from having to resort to samples too. I don't hate samples, but generally when people use samples, even with multi-layering samples, lots of velocity control and things like that, it still oftentimes just winds up being a sample that's just played over and over and over again, a single moment in time repeatedly played. And I'll always opt for something more organic. And this allows the actual recorded version of the internal mic, the recorded internal mic, to be also used for the external mic. And so you're going to wind up with a more organic changing soundscape, and it will follow the internal mic. The relationship will stay similar. So at least in theory, sounds good to me, and I'm happy with that. So anyway, I was really pleased with how this worked out. To demonstrate the sound of an external mic, I'm going to use the drum tracks from the videos that I did a few years ago. And might eventually get around to finishing that series of videos in the future, but I'm just going to use these to show you what it sounds like with two mics on a kick drum. So here we go. So I'm going to mute the kick out and show you the difference. That's just the internal mic. Use headphones, good headphones, or even better yet, a nice monitor system with a good sub, so that you can really feel the impact of that external mic. So it just gives a visceral, three-dimensional response to the bass drum. So you feel it as much as you hear it, which is really helpful when you're mixing, because then sometimes we turn things up too loud when we don't feel it, when we don't really perceive it. We wind up using too much volume to try to really make it known in the mix, and I'd rather feel something than hear it anyway. And a sub kick allows you to do that, or an outside kick mic. This particular mic is an Octava MK319. It's what I typically use, and I love it for one reason, and that's because I've modified it with the Scott Dorsey mod, which you can Google if you want to see what that's all about. But part of that mod is yanking the 10 dB pad, and so the microphone itself is actually up next to a loud, low-frequency bass drum, is actually distorting a bit on the transient. It does pretty much always, and I love it. This is what it sounds like. Now, this does have the processing that I used, and you can go back and look at my earlier set of videos on processing the internal and external kick mics and stuff that I used this set of tracks to demonstrate, and so you can see what processing I've used. But that's the sound. That distortion that you're getting on the front, that's the mic overloading, and I personally love that. And most kick mics or sub kicks, when people use speakers and things, I mean, they have a pretty good distortion artifact as well. So that's what makes the external mic pretty magical to me, is because I seem to respond viscerally to that. I don't hear it as much as I feel it. Okay, so let me show you real quick. I'm going to go ahead and mute this track, and I'm going to unveil here the new external, the faked external track, and I'll show you real quick. All I did was took the kick input, or the inside kick rather, and I just copied it over to a new track, and I'm calling it the fake sub kick, even though it's not really a sub kick, but it's an external kick. And so it's the same exact track playing alongside with totally different processing. Now, some people might wonder, why did you copy a track and make a separate waveform for Pro Tools to keep up with when you could have just used a pre-fader send over to a live aux input, and then process the aux input. The reason I did that was because I have processing on the internal track, and I do not want that processing to be affecting what I'm doing for the external. So you don't have to double it like I did. The other alternative to be able to have individual control over them would be to use no processing and use 2 pre-fader sends basically, or just a pre-fader send with 2 auxes that are assigned to the same input, and then process one for the internal and one to fake the external. So either way you want to do it. I hope that was clear as mud there. But basically, I just copy it. It makes it easier for me because I have 2 different tracks to work with. Okay, so this is what it sounds like with the faked mic. Without it. Back in. Huge difference. Really cool for like rock music, really cool for things where you want to feel the low end. And low end is so huge and so important in so many different genres of popular music now. So how did I do that? Okay, since I've already told you that the mic that I normally use for it distorts, I'm going to show you how I treat this using the internal kick mic. First thing I do is I distort it. Now this plugin's air distortion just comes with Pro Tools, and these are pretty much the way the parameters open to the default. I think I tweaked it a little bit, but I didn't really do too much. So over the top, right? It's distorted. Very, very important. The mix has to be 100%. It really needs to be 100%. Why? Because when you take a signal and you copy it to another track and play it on top of itself and process one and not the other, you run a very high, extremely likely possibility you're going to get weird phasiness and some strange frequency interaction, flangey sounds, whatever. Just because the signals are still essentially the same signal, one with some manipulation on it than the other. So if you want to be able to put the 2 signals that are the same signal together and not have that with one processed and one not, the processed version needs to be radically different. It needs to be fundamentally a different waveform. So I'm using distortion to fundamentally change the sound. That is a different waveform than the internal mic alone. So then I'm going to come over here and I use the channel strip here to do some dynamic processing, just to mash it a bit. I put in a filter, low pass filter, to take all the trash and edge off of it. I just want that growl from the distortion. Then I'm using EQ to keep the lows nice and high, but to pull out the low mids. And then essentially, I'm isolating this mic the way I did in my previous set of videos. If you go and look at the isolation of the external kick mic video, it'll explain what basically is going on here. But I'm using a compressor that sidechained off a pre-fader send from the snare drum, so that every time the snare drum hits, I'm not getting, the audio from this mic is being attenuated. So I'll put that in. See, the snare hit is making that drop. And then I'm put an expander or noise gate basically on it as well, keyed off of the internal kick mic, the regular unprocessed internal kick mic. So now I'm just getting the impact of that. And then I wound up putting this Bomb Factory. When was the last time you saw someone use this? This also comes with Pro Tools. It's the first LA2 style simulation, and it was like so cool back in like 2000 or 2001 when it came out. But it's pretty much not now. However, I still kind of like what it did to the sound. It made it a little fluffier somehow. And I don't need a lot of attack. I really do need the body from this. So the additional compression and whatever harmonic emulation it does is nice. Without it, with it. Now, nothing about the way I've done this is particularly hard and fast. The really important part is using the distortion or something like it, some sort of basically distortion type plug-in. And there are a lot of them available. I generally, for demonstration purposes, use what comes with Pro Tools. That way people can do what I'm doing without having to go out and buy additional plugins. Plugins are awesome. If you got the pockets, go buy them. It's a lot of fun and they're great. But the truth of the matter is you don't have to spend a ton of money to be able to do really great records, because the tools that are fairly accessible can do a lot when you know how to use them. So distortion to fundamentally change the sound, and then basically the other processing to get a hold of it, because when you don't put the filtering and the EQ and stuff, and then of course don't put the noise gate to contain it, all that leakage is not particularly helpful. You know, all that rumble. But this is a fundamentally different sound than that. So you put the two together, and you don't get cancellation or weird phase in this. You just get a puffy kind of external view and a clear internal view of that drum. So this is the fake, and here's the actual output, which is more natural. It's less over the top. So you can change the amount of distortion if you want to back it off a little, make it a little bit more natural. I kind of enjoyed pushing it. The rock dog in me appreciated pushing it. So there you go. I hope that is useful to you. Next time you don't have the ability to record an external kick mic for whatever reason, don't fret. You might just want to reach for this and keep right on rolling and making great music for everyone to enjoy. So thanks for checking out this video. Please check out my blog at joelcameron.com, and I thank you for watching.